Why Gen Z is the new silent generation? I don't know about that one, Chief. I don't think we're the silent generation. I don't know about that one, but let's hear him out.
They're anxious. They're risk averse. They're hyper aware of global collapse. They're always accused of being weak. They grew up being constantly watched. No, I'm not talking about Gen Z. I'm talking about the silent generation. They're the cohort history barely narrates. Right in
Yeah.
between the self-proclaimed greatest generation and the endlessly criticized boomers, the silent generation learned early that
Why are they called the greatest? I've never known this.
attention was dangerous. They survived by keeping their heads down, building the world everyone would later argue inside. Right now, the oldest members of the silent generation are turning 100, just as the world drifts back into familiar instability. The conditions that shape them are resurfacing, but the generation that learned how to live through these conditions is nearly gone. This makes us wonder, what was the impact from these people we almost never talk about? The silent generation didn't dominate culture through spectacle and didn't win by ideology or aesthetic rebellion. Instead, they influenced the world through tone. They believed the highest moral good was continuity. Stability mattered more than self-actualization. Function mattered more than identity. This is the generation with the least mythology. We don't commemorate their influence. We just
So function mattered more than identity. Yo, there's something called identity politics today. And it's mostly involved around, it's mostly around us, younger folks, Gen Z and millennials. What?
live
I still don't
inside
get
their
it, okay.
influence. The silent
Still early
generation
on.
left a world designed to survive anxiety without collapsing into chaos. A society optimized for risk management and emotional control. History is cyclical. What goes around comes around. And Gen Z is actually mirroring the traits of the people who came decades before their birth. Today's youngest adults aren't exactly acting like revolutionaries as much as they're acting like caretakers in training. So if Gen Z really is the new silent generation, we need to understand what kind of world requires a generation like this to exist at all. The silent generation was born into a world that was already breaking. They were born between 1928 to 1945, which was kind of a waiting room in world history. The Great Depression destroyed this illusion that adults were in control, and World War II made that uncertainty permanent. There was some serious stuff going on, and these children were raised to not interfere. They were raised to intuitively understand that survival depended on not adding weight to a structure that was already breaking. The Great Depression took away a lot. Banks closed, jobs vanished, families moved suddenly or fell apart. Scarcity trained them early as sort of a muscle memory. Food, money, attention, and emotion were treated as finite resources. Authority was respected on the basic fact that it just had to be respected. Challenging authority felt dangerous. Rules existed to prevent further disaster. Even though conformity would later be called out as weakness, conformity during this era was just basic situational intelligence. This generation learned when silence was safer than honesty, when obedience preserved stability, and when standing out made you a liability. Many of them were the children of immigrants, Dust Bowl survivors, or families one bad week away.
So this is basically the whole opposite of Gen Z, or it's basically the opposite of the kind of message I want to put out from my videos. The thing that stood out to me the most is when he said conformity, and that's not because they were all weak pussies, like how we all see conformity now as just he's just trying to escape the conversation and not argue about it, which I totally get if you're that kind of a person, and I might be in a lot of situations and in a lot of conversations, right? But these days, I tell everyone to just question everything. Left leaning, right leaning, this religion, that religion. I'm not religious, but even non-religious, question everything, man. You can't just believe anything blindly just to follow something. But a lot of people won't question. Choose the path that will give them the most resources possible and the most peaceful life possible, whether that would disrupt someone else's life in many ways or not. I just explained left and right leaning politics clashing, right? And how some people make more out of, being left from being right because they benefit from it or so on. And some people are genuinely left or right, and it doesn't matter if they're benefiting from it financially. But yeah, we're not conformative at all.
From losing everything. Patriotism, thrift, and loyalty were survival strategies. The unspoken
Patriotism these days is being made fun of, which is insane.
rule of the silent generation childhood was simple. Adults are overwhelmed, so don't become another.
Not that I'm a patriot, but yeah, still try and make the country better, even if you don't like it much.
problem. Emotional control was expected. Anxiety had no outlet, so it turned inward and sharpened. The most startling fact about the younger generation is its silence. By comparison with the flaming youth of their fathers and mothers, today's younger generation is a still small flame. It does not issue manifestos, make speeches, or carry posters. It has been called the silent generation. Time Magazine, 1951. Radio sat in living rooms delivering constant updates in calm, measured voices. War news, economic reports, presidential speeches. Fear was narrated with composure so catastrophe could arrive politely. Children absorbed the message without interrupting.
Okay, and now everything's being fed to you by rage bait posts and Reddit posts and tweets and Instagram and people hating you and wishing death upon you and the most negative feed possible. Just open any social media app, you'll just feed the most negative feed possible because that's what gets clicks and engagement. I mean, maybe if we barely had electricity growing up, if we didn't have phones, social media, and so on, maybe we would be calmer as well. Because hey, there's a war going on in this other place of the this other part of the world. I don't know shit. I'm eating pie with my family and talking about school and work.
The tone stayed steady
Why did I
even
say
when the
pie?
content was horrifying. Yes, the world is unstable, but you're expected to remain composed while it happens. You need to
I
listen.
agree with that.
You need to regulate yourself. You need to shut up and keep going. Franklin Roosevelt.
Not shutting up, but regulating your emotions and being more stoic about stuff in life and only focusing on stuff you have control over. I agree with that.
Fireside chats reassured people, but they also normalized the idea that enormous problems could be explained calmly while you sat quietly and just took it while looking at a fireplace.
Yeah,
A
nah.
symbolic fireplace. That internal pressure showed up in the culture this generation created. I mean, good grief. Charles Schulz's Peanuts resonated deeply. These children lived in a stripped-down world with no visible adults, carrying adult-level dread in small bodies. Charlie Brown is earnest, rule-following, deeply anxious, and perpetually trying to do the right thing in a system that keeps disappointing him. This was not satire. There was no irony in this. Peanuts was a recognition. It's what childhood looks like when kids are forced to emotionally metabolize adult fear without the language to name it. Dr. Seuss was another silent generation artifact. On the surface, his books are bright, silly, and playful, but underneath they're filled with a very specific kind of childhood unease. Authority figures are absurd. Rules appear out of nowhere. Reality bends. The world feels confusing, but you're expected to keep moving through it anyway. The Cat in the Hat represents chaos entering a controlled traditional suburban home. The Sneetches is a story about arbitrary social hierarchies enforced for no reason. The Lorax carries a moral dread that adults are destroying something irreversible, while children are left to inherit the aftermath. Dr. Seuss taught silent kids that confusion was normal, that the world didn't always make sense. So
This all seems like some kind of a psyop. This all seems like there's like 100 people controlling everything in the world, or most stuff in the world, and all these billions of people are their pawns, and they just try to make him just focus on what they gotta do, and not question anything, and ignore everything that's happening bad. Yeah. Isn't that our reality? Probably is.
the best you could do was navigate it with imagination. The Diary of Anne Frank was even more direct and dark. Anne Frank, born in 1929, was writing the defining psychological document of silent generation childhood. A child forced into adult-level terror, trying to stay human inside a collapsing world. Her diary captured what it meant to be young in an era where history was literally a physical presence outside the door. The fear was literal, and yet the voice was startlingly reflective. There was survival through inwardness, through observation, through the attempt to preserve meaning when the external world becomes unlivable. When I was like 12, I read J.D. Salinger's 1951 novel, The Catcher in the Rye. The book felt strangely relatable for how old it was and how young I was. The whole thing is written in this casual, conversational, train of thought style. There are aspects of this book that have stuck with me throughout life. Holden Caulfield is a silent generation boy trapped between childhood innocence and adult disillusionment, suddenly aware that the world is full of phoniness. His alienation is emotional. He represents what happens when a generation grows up too aware, too early, unable to fully believe in the structures around them, but also unable to escape them. Holden dreams about preservation. He dreams of standing at the edge of a cliff to stop children from falling, and that metaphor represents silent morality, caretaking in the shadow of collapse. The mark of an immature man is that he wants to die nobly for a cause, while the mark of the mature man is that he wants to live humbly for one. As the silent generation aged into adulthood, they never lost this lesson that instability has a cost, and someone always pays it. They were too young to fight the war and too old to be shaped by post-war optimism. Even when prosperity arrived, it felt conditional, like something that could vanish if it was mismanaged. Midlife for the silence brought the slow erosion of certainty, with all the inflation in the 1970s and institutional decay. These people were uneasy, silently uneasy. Imagine this, if you will. The Twilight Zone aired between 1959 and 1964. It's a show that shockingly ages pretty well. It did not rely on spectacle or violence. It didn't necessarily need special effects because it presented subtle moral traps, bureaucratic nightmares, technology that followed the rules perfectly while betraying human needs. Authority figures were not villains. They were worse. Authority figures were indifferent. The horror came from realizing the system was working exactly as designed. There is a fifth dimension beyond that which is known to man. It is a dimension as vast as space and as timeless as infinity. It is the middle ground between light and shadow, between science and superstition, and it lies between the pit of man's fears and the summit of his knowledge. This is the dimension of imagination. It is an area which we call the Twilight Zone. Rod Serling. Alfred Hitchcock understood the same thing. His films were appealing to this generation because they taught that danger doesn't announce itself. It hides in politeness, in routine, and in well-kept homes and familiar faces. Anxiety hums beneath the surface. Nothing looks wrong until suddenly everything is wrong. This same dread matured into the cinema of Stanley Kubrick, who was born in 1928.
If nothing feels wrong, and suddenly everything feels wrong and everything is wrong, then isn't that the product of telling everybody to ignore and just keep it pushing and don't think about it and just, ignore the issue? Like, if you're 24 years old and you go to the doctor and the doctor tells you, you got this pre-diabetic whatever condition, if you continue doing this, you'll fuck up your freaking life. And you say, if I don't focus on it, it'll escape. And you continue eating the way you're eating. And now you're 35, and now they're telling you, hey, you're diabetic. This is a big issue. What are you doing? You're still young. What is happening? 10 years ago, I just told you this. And you're like, if I ignore, I'll just get away. And then 10 years later, guess what? Well, you're not alive. You're dead.
Kubrick's films feel like the Twilight Zone episodes stretched into cinematic scale. Dr. Strangelove presents a bureaucratic apocalypse, the end of the world delivered through procedures, memos, and institutional logic. 2001: A Space Odyssey is even colder.
I was born in 2001.
Technology evolving beyond human comprehension. Systems becoming godlike. Humanity reduced to a fragile passenger. Modernity destroys you with competence, with indifference, with machines and institutions doing exactly what they were built to do. The silent generation fits the artist archetype in the Strauss-Howe generational theory. Born after a societal crisis, they were shaped to refine, humanize, and stabilize what already existed. Their childhoods were overstructured and emotionally compressed, producing adults...
This is basically the same as China, if I'm not mistaken, right? China was this poor country, basically just people like... All those cities were just basically like villages. They were just poverty, right? And then all of a sudden, they're a world superpower. A generation or two basically worked their asses off, without actually getting all the benefits from it. Like they actually worked their asses off, didn't get much in return, but worked a lot for the country, and then the country became the China it is today. This is what he is explaining right now with the silent generation in the U.S. Even the silent generation in Europe after the Second World War. Same shit, especially in Europe.
Who were adaptive, detail-oriented, and deeply aware of second-order consequences. They believed in maintenance instead of grand gestures. While other generations chased meaning through expression, the silent sought it through competence. They perfected systems not because they loved them, but
am I the only one who's not chasing meaning? I don't care about meaning. I just want to have enough money to be able to, enjoy life, and I don't want any luxury rich stuff. Okay, I'm already very good at traveling on a budget. I know I can travel the whole world on a budget. Okay, I'm not looking for any huge meaning in my life. I don't care about it. I just need enough to live peacefully. Maybe that's my meaning, to live peacefully. I don't think people would agree that that's a meaning.
Because they feared what happened.
But the fact that I need a meaning, fuck
their
off,
work
man.
and their ethics all carried the same imprint. Quiet, disciplined, and built to endure pressure without drawing attention to itself. What would they grow up to be like? When the war ended, the silent generation arrived with a mandate: do not let this happen again. Their adulthood coincided with reconstruction instead of reinvention. Louder generations debated ideals, but the silence focused on function. They built stability the same way they had survived childhood, by tightening processes, professionalizing roles, and removing as much chaos as possible from daily life. The systems people now describe as rigid, bureaucratic, or soul-crushing were built by adults who had watched institutions collapse and decided redundancy was moral. Paperwork, compliance, credentialing, and HR culture were attempts to make failure predictable instead of catastrophic. Endless forms don't feel oppressive when the alternative is breadlines and war rationing. The silent generation turned work into structure. They normalized lifelong careers, pensions, and corporate ladders because continuity felt safer than volatility. They professionalized law, medicine, education, and government, stripping those fields of personality and replacing them with standards. Expertise mattered more than charisma. Reliability mattered more than
well, there was basically no push for what we call today as individualism. Today, whew.
The world they built may not have been exciting, but at least it was legible. Culturally, they left fingerprints everywhere while refusing to sign their name. They were early civil rights organizers, union lawyers, teachers, journalists, and administrators who moved history forward without turning it into a personal brand. Hello, darkness, my old friend. I've come to talk with you again, because a vision softly creeping left its seeds while I was sleeping, and the vision that was planted in my brain still remains, within the sound of silence. Simon and Garfunkel. Musicians, filmmakers, and writers frame their work as serious craft, not edgy rebellion for its own sake. Silent generation creators rarely claim to represent.
Are you guys focusing, you guys noticing all these cars? This is when the US started heavily focusing on expanding a lot into suburbs. A lot more richer people moving into, or middle class people moving to the suburbs. Downtown's becoming more for people that have less money and so on, and the path of the U.S. becoming very, very car-centric, especially everything outside of the Northeast, basically the 13 colonies.
Their generation. They believed work should stand
Everything else, just car-centric cities.
Bob Dylan is the perfect paradox. A man mythologized as a revolutionary who was, at his core, an artist of restraint. Born in 1941, Dylan arrived just in time with the silent instinct to turn anxiety into poetry. His early songs were unearthed tensions. They sounded like a generation watching history move overhead, trying to
I've never heard a song from him.
Beneath it. Even when he became the voice of protest, he still refused the role. Early rock and roll was a subtle rebellion. Elvis Presley, Chuck Berry, and Buddy Holly all channeled anxiety into rhythm without overt politics. The Silent Gen became the institutional caretakers of the post-war order. As mid-level leaders and planners, they helped engineer and maintain structures like NATO, the United Nations, and the expanding welfare state. They made these systems operational. Yes, the boomers supplied the moral arguments, but the Silents wrote the manuals for those arguments. Their relationship with authority was complex. Vietnam and Watergate made them cautious reformers. They learned that trust should be managed instead of assumed, that cynicism seeped into policy, oversight, and media norms. Today's obsession with accountability and checks seems like it came from outrage, but it may go back further, coming from this generation that learned what happens when power goes unquestioned. Technologically, the silent...
Isn't this what's happening today? A lot of power is going unquestioned because there's a lot of silencing and a lot of censorship in Europe, and not in my part of Europe. My part of Europe is just, I'm in the southeastern part of Europe. They're just idiots politicians here. But, you know, it's a poor country as well. But when it comes to Western Europe and the US and Canada, so much silencing, so much censorship. If you say stuff that is against the norm, there's supposed to be free speech. No, there isn't. A lot of the times, especially in the UK right now, saying certain stuff will get you fucking arrested. Even if you're the one in the right. Even if somebody wronged you. In the UK! Anyway.
Were the quiet
We're getting to that point.
They did not
what he's saying.
pathologize innovation, but they adapted to it faster than they're given credit for. They moved comfortably from radio to television, from paper ledgers to early computers, from analog workflows to digital logic. The digital age emerged because they translated new tools into existing systems instead of burning.
I still can't see how Gen Z is becoming a silent generation.
Everything down to
It's
start
been
over.
most
We
of
were
this
the
video.
generation called silent.
Like, I've watched 3/4 of the video.
We were silent
Almost.
neither as some thought because we shared the period's official optimism, nor as others thought because we feared its official repression. We were silent because the exhilaration of social action seemed to many of us just one more way of escaping the personal, of masking for a while that dread of the meaningless, which was man's fate. Joan Didion. This generation's
Man's faith is meaningless? Okay, interesting. As somebody who's, you know, a mix of stoicism and nihilism, but that's how my brain kind of works. Kind of agree with that. You can put meaning to it, but you don't really have to. You know, just don't think about it that much. Work on bettering yourself and the, you know, the society around you.
legacy lacks a unifying
You can make
aesthetic.
that your
There is
meaning,
no
I
style,
guess.
no revival era, no nostalgia market. Their culture was embedded, not expressed. It lives in how meetings are run, how risk is managed, and how emotion is kept below the surface of public life. Every generation shaped by crisis gets misread in real time. The silent generation was labeled timid, conformist, and overly cautious by the louder generations that followed. Today, Gen Z and Gen Alpha inherit a similar diagnosis. Fragile,
What?
anxious, overmanaged. Different language.
Conformist? Anxious? Yeah. A lot of, you know, a lot of younger folks, way more anxious, way more socially... How do I say this? This is just my experience, but I could be wrong. But socially, like, way less skilled, I'd say. Like, way less aware. Like, goddamn, like, most of our parents and grandparents met each other in real life. Not most, all of them. But, you know, most of my male friends are too fucking embarrassed and scared. As he mentioned, scared, socially, whatever, right? Anxious. They can't even approach a girl. Meanwhile, I get rejected almost not every day. I'm not going out, you know, approaching girls every day. But most of the time, it's either at the park on the weekends or in the gym, which is most of the time. I get rejected a lot. I've been embarrassed multiple times. I've been embarrassed and humiliated so much throughout my childhood that I became a superhuman when it comes to those kinds of emotions as an adult. So I'm like, fuck it. It's just, you know. Those kinds of people will forget you immediately. The people that saw you around you and you feel embarrassed by it, who cares? Who fucking cares? One thing I'd say that I don't know, maybe I should be proud of or I shouldn't be proud of, But what in high school, I remember a teacher called me one of the most nonconformist people. Not specifically those words, but I'm like, trying to explain it as fast as possible. One of the most nonconforming kids she has, taught in this school, and I was like, I don't know what that means, but hell yeah, you know. And just because of that, I don't think we're the new silent generation. We're the new silent generation. Are you seeing the protests and social medias? Am I being silent right now? I don't believe in most stuff people believe on the left or right when it comes to a lot of stuff. And I believe in some stuff.
But the same misunderstanding. What looks like weakness from the outside is often calibration from the inside. Both groups came of age in environments defined by instability they did not cause and could not control. For the silence, it was...
Wait, what does it say for Gen
ability
Alpha? Generation Alpha? Oh, it doesn't say anything. Generation Beta, future focused. Because it had everything for like every other generation, but for Generation Alpha it doesn't say anything. It should be like full AI domination and living with aliens.
It did not cause.
That's how it
could
feels.
not control.
Yeah.
For the silence, it was economic collapse and global war. For Gen Z and Gen Alpha, it's the long after effects of 9/11, the 2008 financial crash, political polarization, and of course the 2020 pandemic.
Political polarization.
Further turned childhood into a monitored prison. In both cases, adults responded to danger by tightening supervision. Childhood became safer on paper and narrower in practice. Rules multiplied, risk shrank, autonomy was postponed. Both generations share optimization without agency. They were trained to navigate systems they didn't design. They're measured constantly by metrics, surveillance, performance reviews, algorithms. They were given new tools, frameworks, and language, but very little authority to change the underlying structure. So silence becomes fluency, knowing how to operate without triggering consequences. The silent generation learned to manage anxiety internally because there was no social permission to express it. Gen Z learned the opposite, how to name anxiety precisely while still being constrained by systems that don't bend. Therapy language, debt aversion, quiet quitting, and institutional skepticism are adaptations to environments where missteps carry outsized costs. When risk feels permanent, restraint becomes rational. The silence adapted to mass media that standardized behavior and centralized authority. Gen Z and Gen Alpha live inside platforms that track, archive, and rank every interaction. One generation learned not to stand out in a factory economy. The other learned not to stand out in an algorithmic economy. A timeless lesson. Visibility is exposure. Culturally, both generations prioritize care over conquest. The silent generation expressed this through loyalty, duty, and institutional maintenance. Gen Z expresses it through community building, mutual aid, and mental health awareness.
I'm sorry, I'm just not... I'm getting his point, kinda, but... that us making... that what? No. That's not... This isn't making us the silent generation. What? It's... maybe I'm dumb.
Neither trusts charisma. Neither believes volume equals truth. Authority is approached cautiously and skeptically. Resistance happens sideways through disengagement, reframing, and quiet refusal. When I was a very young child...
Have you seen the news and the videos and the shit people are doing? Yeah, there's quiet quitting, there's all of this, right? But there's people talking about it, there's people protesting about it, there's people actually, hating on richer people, older people, these kinds of people, those kinds of people. People causing problems in businesses because, like, literally older people call us loud and self-entitled and problematic. Like, what? Us quiet quitting and giving up on life and playing Fortnite to, not focus on my depression because I won't get buy a house. That's not quiet quitting. Quiet quitting, what am I saying? That's not a silent generation. There's some people doing that. But yeah, I don't think there's ever going to be a silent generation ever again. There's people that are just way easily emotionally manipulated and radicalized from insane internet stuff. And a lot of the times, most of them, I don't blame them. I don't blame them.
I watched the tail end
Not
of
that I
Mr.
agree with
Rogers'
everything, but I don't
Neighborhood
blame
before
him.
his retirement and passing in the early 2000s. As a kid, his show seemed corny, but coming back to it as an adult is this surreal, hauntingly
I've never
emotional
watched
experience.
this.
Because you realize Fred Rogers actually may not have even been talking to children. It kind of feels like he's talking to you, as you are right now. Rogers understood that the modern world was going to produce overstimulated, anxious, overmanaged children. And his response was
Well,
radically
yeah, because everybody taught us, don't question authority, listen to authority, don't do this, don't do that, or you'll get in trouble, all of this, be like this. And yeah, a lot of people become very anxious. Now, today's people are anxious for a lot of other different reasons, but yeah.
quiet. Just a steady voice saying your feelings are mentionable and therefore manageable. That is a silent generation ethic. Stability through emotional containment. Kindness as infrastructure. Rogers was teaching kids to be safe inside themselves.
Emotional containment, don't agree with that. Being resilient, talking about it, and confronting it without, disrupting society in some illegal, insane way. That's the mature way to do it. Just keeping it in? Nah.
In an era where everything
Reframing?
is performance, Mr. Rogers is
There's
what
a time and a
happens
place
when
for
generation
reframing.
raised on catastrophe decides the most revolutionary act is gentleness. Throughout human history, we seem to have a lot of the same hopes and fears for our experiences. Notice how The Twilight Zone parallels so cleanly onto the modern series Black Mirror. Both shows emerge from the same fear: systems outpacing humanity, technology enforcing logic without empathy, and ordinary people trapped inside mechanisms that no longer feel accountable. Of course, Gen Z is more diverse, more online, more publicly expressive than the silent generation ever was. But they share the same archetype. The
Yeah,
artist.
I get what he
Archetypes
means.
are about function. Artist generation
I still wouldn't say we're a silent type generation, but I see what he means. Maybe I'm dumb and I'm not seeing the full picture he's saying.
don't announce themselves as world changers. They just endure. They absorb pressure. They refine the emotional and institutional infrastructure so something survives the chaos. In the 1960s, the silents were dismissed as conformists while the world burned around them. Decades later, we realized they were the ones quietly holding the center. Today's youngest generations are being mocked in the same way, using different words. But history suggests something bigger is happening. These are generations being trained to do one thing and one thing only: outlast. Some generations never asked to be remembered, which may be why the silent Gen influence is so easy to miss. This is kind of like Gen X's legacy. Their strength was never loud enough to become legend. It was quiet enough to become permanent. As they pass out of living memory, we are left standing inside what they built. The rhythms of work, the expectation of professionalism, the emotional tone of public life, the way institutions prioritize stability over inspiration. These are all inherited decisions, made
Institutions don't prioritize stability these days, nor do businesses. I don't know, maybe that's my country, but
by
yeah.
people who believe civilization survives through maintenance above all else. The irony is that their greatest success looks like stagnation.
If institutions prioritize stability, the fuck's happening in Europe? You know what's happening right now in Europe, and in a lot of in North America, right? In many different ways. You know, a civil war or something is coming, okay? And it's gonna be my generation. What are you talking about, dude?
that were designed to prevent collapse now feel slow, rigid, and impersonal. But that friction is the cost of durability. The silent generation optimized for survival across generations, and for a long time, it worked. History is turning again. The conditions that once shaped the silence are daily realities. Gen Z and Gen Alpha inherited their caution. They are growing up inside systems designed by people who believed fragility was the greatest threat a society could face. However, today's youth are being asked to carry that weight consciously. They see the cracks, they feel the pressure, and instead of denying it, they're learning how to live with it. Artist generations create work that is invisible.
I'm actively talking about it, and I want something to do about it. You're telling me that the number of organizations, going against stuff that's, horrible in society, stuff that needs work. It can be about many things. It can be very left-leaning ideology-based stuff, whatever. You think that the amount of organizations now are the same as back then? There's way more now. Doesn't that mean that we are actually fighting authority and going against it and not wanting to accept this? I don't know, man. I think I can see his point, but at the same time, I feel like I'm missing something. I feel like I'm missing something. Hey, and if you disagree with me and you're saying I'm an idiot, a dumbass who doesn't get it, if you want to leave a hate comment, leave a hate comment. I don't care. Just make sure to explain what I missed and what's his point that I'm missing,
Until it's gone. Only later do we realize that everything still standing bears their fingerprints. Throughout human history, it has been said time and time again that a wise man once said nothing. A wise man understood the difference between noise.
I've never heard that. I'm not joking. I'm not joking. Okay, this is a good video, but I've never heard that. A wise man once said nothing. There's like a running joke. I think it's universal, but it's something right. Sometimes it's better for you to not say anything than to just open your mouth, implying that I'm a dumbass idiot who doesn't know shit. And and usually you feel like an idiot after you said something and somebody told you that. That's what
meaning. He understood that silence
what that reminds me of.
It is the ability to sit inside uncertainty without immediately turning it into performance. We live in an age that treats expression as existence. If it isn't posted, declared, branded, or reacted to, it's as if it never happened. The silent generation came from a world where the opposite was true. What mattered most was often what couldn't be announced. Endurance was private. Character was unbroadcasted. Strength was measured in what you didn't need to prove. Not every generation is meant to shout. Some are meant to listen. Some are meant to hold steady. Some are meant to carry the weight without narrating it. The content of history is read from the loudest voices in the room. But the context of history belongs to the ones who knew when to be silent.
Interesting video. Well, very intelligent, smart guy, but I don't know, I feel like I'm missing something. Anyway, well, tell me what you guys think. I feel a little bit bad reacting to this video because I feel like, again, I didn't get something, that I missed something. But anyway, interesting channel. Subscribe to him, like the video. This guy deserves way more views on this video. So let me see actually the comments. I usually hate generation whatever BS, but this was actually an astute analysis. Okay, unrelated, as a Gen Z agree with others. There's a lot of like philosophical type comments, which I'm not that much into philosophy. I don't really get that much. A lot of people forget that for many of us Gen Z, our grandparents are silent generation. Yep. I know that. Nothing looks wrong until suddenly everything's wrong. I mean, what I'm seeing on YouTube and TikTok and so on, even though I'm not on TikTok, but I'll see a lot of TikToks posted as shorts or reels. Everybody's complaining about anything. Even if those issues don't exist in their lives, everybody's trying to be a victim in some way, As a Gen Z, this sentence just described the evolution of my entire worldview over my entire life. Okay. Super excited to deal with Gen Alpha becoming boomers and wrecking everything we try to fix. Oh, bro, why do you think we're not wrecking anything? We are wrecking a lot of stuff as well. Oh, bro, what do you mean? Silence would be so nice, as opposed to my parents' generation pointed. You know what? Maybe the fact that I said I'm looking for peace and not any great meaning. Maybe that's me proving to myself that I actually am part of this silent generation somehow, even though I don't really think that's the case. Tell me what you think and have a nice day.